Coordinates locked. Location: Hinterkaifeck, Bavaria, Germany. Year: 1922. An isolated farmstead on the atlas of humanity. In cartography, we are taught that blank spaces are simply unexplored territory, but sometimes they are voids, created by an event so absolute it erases all that came before. The official record details the brutal, unsolved murder of 6 individuals. The file is cold, the motives lost to time, a black hole in the annals of law enforcement. But data can be extrapolated. Faint echoes persist in the silence. We will now attempt a full reconstruction of the perpetrator's psyche, a speculative narrative built from the emotional residue and the crushing weight of what was left behind. Accessing. Chronicle, the tenant in the walls. The cold was a hunter. For days it had stalked me through the woods, a relentless predator of frost and wind. I was no longer a man. I was a creature, driven by the singular, desperate need for shelter. The farm was not a home. It was a beacon, an island in a sea of white. The barn was the first sanctuary. The smell of hay and livestock was the smell of life, of warmth. I burrowed into the loft like an animal, the exhaustion absolute. I slept, and when I woke, I began to explore. The house was connected to the barn, and in the house, there was an attic. It was a forgotten space, a kingdom of dust and shadow. And from this kingdom I discovered I had a view. Through cracks in the floorboards, I could see them, my subjects. At first I learned them by their sounds, their frequencies. The man was heavy-foot, his presence announced by the groan of the floorboards. The woman was quick-step, a lighter, more frantic pattern. The maid was the sigh, a constant exhalation of fatigue. The daughter was the hum, a high melodic tune that vibrated through the very wood of the house. And the infant was the cry, a piercing alarm that signaled some primal need. These were not people. They were a cacophony, an orchestra of noise that I, from my silent perch, began to study. I witnessed their rituals. I watched them eat, their jaws moving in rhythmic silence from my vantage point. I watched the father read to the hum, his deep voice a low drone, the girl's occasional laughter, a sharp spike in the data. I saw quick steps soothe the cry. I saw the family kneel for evening prayers, a synchronized murmur. I catalogued it all. It was meaningless. A series of patterns. A biological clockwork, ticking away beneath me. Then, a change. A near discovery.
Mama, Anya sa may sinsiling ni Genin.
I froze. Every muscle tensed. I was no longer an observer. I was prey. Down below, Quickstep's voice, dismissing it. It is only the wind in the eaves, my child. But the system had been altered. The adrenaline left a residue of something new in my veins. Possession. Anger. This wasn't their space to investigate. They were not allowed to be curious about the scratching. This was my nest, my kingdom, and the noises were becoming aware of their king. The thought solidified over the next day. It was no longer a fleeting piece of corrupted data. It was a core command. The house was mine. I, the silent observer, was its true master. The family was a chaotic infestation, a glitch that had become self-aware. The solution presented itself in the cold logic of the barn. Leaning against a wall, forgotten, was the tool, the key. I held it. It felt correct. Not a weapon of rage, but an instrument of order. A tool to restore the system to its proper state. Silence. The plan was simple, logical. I would call them out, one by one. I would deinstall the errors. The sun began to set, painting the snow outside the barn in hues of orange and purple. The work could begin. I started with heavy foot. I told him a beam in the cattle run needed bracing before the next snow. He grunted an affirmation, grabbing a lantern. His trust was absolute. He walked ahead of me into the darker recesses of the barn. He never heard me raise the tool. The first error was corrected with a sound like a melon splitting on stone. Quickstep was next. I called her name from the barn door. She came, her brow furrowed with concern. She asked where her husband was. I told her he needed her help. She followed. The second correction was faster than the first. Then, the hum, the daughter. I found her on her way to the barn, searching for her parents. She saw me. She saw the tool in my hand. Her hum caught in her throat. I returned to the house. The sigh was in the kitchen, her back to me. She was the fourth. The cry was in its bassinet in the master bedroom. A final, piercing wail before it, too, was silenced. The house was clean. For a final night, it was truly mine. The silence was a physical presence, a heavy, comforting blanket. I walked through every room, touching their possessions, feeling the cooling air. I sat at their dinner table and finished the stew left in the pot. It was cold, but it was sustenance. I climbed the stairs to the master bedroom. I pulled back the covers on their bed. The indentation of their bodies was still there. I lay down, and for the first time in months, I slept. A deep, dreamless sleep. The master of a silent, perfect kingdom. The next morning, I rose with the sun. I fed the livestock in the barn out of a strange, vestigial habit. Then I walked out the door and back into the snow, leaving the silence behind me. I did not look back. The bodies were discovered 4 days later, after the daughter had been absent from school. The scene baffled investigators. The victims had been lured to the barn and systematically dispatched. The family dog was found tied up inside the barn, unharmed. The livestock had been recently fed. The killer had remained for at least one night after the event. The investigation lasted for decades, but produced no convictions. The farm was eventually demolished, an attempt to scrub the blight from the landscape. But the data remains. The Hinterkaifeck case is not a mystery about who. It is a chronicle of a human mind collapsing into a state of pure, predatory logic. It is a testament to the fact that sometimes the most terrifying monster is the one that seeks not chaos, not wealth, not revenge, but only a little peace and quiet.